her former title, Her Royal Highness, despite the fact that she and Harry stepped away from their royal roles.
Breaking today, Prince William doubles down. According to multiple sources, it's now a matter of when, not if, he strips Prince Harry and Meghan Markle of their royal titles.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are going to have no role when Prince William becomes king, and he's already planning this out, and it's really not so much that he said they are not going to have roles.
What about Meghan and Harry? Because there are reports that Prince Harry, Meghan Markle and their children could be set to lose their royal titles if and when Prince William becomes monarch.
You're absolutely right. I think Meghan Markle has been very brazen recently with the use of the HRH.
Your titles are gone. You're going to be Meghan Mountbatten Windsor. Your husband's going to be Harry Mountbatten Windsor. And all your threats of legal action, I think, is something that William will quite rightly stare down. The king might think that this is something he can do, but of course, he no longer officially controls Highgrove. Prince William does. And this was never going to fly.
Prince William will strip Prince Andrew, along with all other non-working royals, of their HRHs and princely titles when he ascends to the throne. Meghan and Harry will see their dukedoms and HRHs formally revoked, according to the Daily Beast, by Prince William. I just had this conversation about Harry and Meghan. I think I was talking to Fox News, and I said, they might not think the rules apply to them, but they are insisting on using titles from the British royal family. And when you do that, whether you like it or not, you are representing the monarchy, and there are some rules that you have to abide by.
The agreement that was made did not remove the title. It restricted the way it was to be used. It was not to be used publicly.
For Prince Harry and Meghan Markle to have their titles stripped, as well as
Prince William plans on stripping both Harry and Meghan of their HRH titles once he becomes king.
The palace isn't making announcements. There are no emergency briefings, no royal decrees, no dramatic headlines coming from Buckingham Palace. But behind the velvet curtains and centuries-old protocol, something far more dangerous is happening, a quiet power shift. And at the center of it all is Prince William, moving with patience, precision, and purpose. Because while the world is distracted by headlines, documentaries, and carefully curated appearances from California, insiders claim William is doing something far more consequential, rewriting the rules of royal relevance in a way that could permanently neutralize Prince Harry and Meghan Markle without ever publicly touching their titles. This isn't about revenge, it's about succession. Sources close to the royal machine whisper that William has learned from every mistake the monarchy made during the Sussex fallout. Loud confrontation only feeds the narrative. Public punishment creates martyrs. So instead, the strategy is silence, restructuring, and something far colder, irrelevance by design. Key patronages quietly reassigned, access subtly narrowed, royal language updated to emphasize working royals only. No announcement needed. The message is baked into policy. What's chilling is how intentional it all feels. William isn't reacting, he's preparing. Preparing for a reign where titles without duty mean nothing, where proximity equals power, and where the monarchy survives not by clinging to bloodlines, but by controlling visibility. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud. Insiders claim this blueprint doesn't require parliament. It doesn't require stripping titles outright. It simply changes the value of those titles until they're ceremonial in name only. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan continue building a global brand around royal association. But what happens when the institution itself quietly moves on? Because if William's strategy succeeds, the question won't be, will Harry and Meghan lose their titles? It'll be, when did those titles stop mattering? And by the time the public notices, it may already be too late. The palace isn't making announcements. There are no emergency briefings, no royal decrees, no dramatic headlines coming from Buckingham Palace. But behind the velvet curtains and centuries-old protocol, something far more dangerous is happening, a quiet power shift. And at the center of it all is Prince William, moving with patience, precision, and purpose. Because while the world is distracted by headlines, documentaries, and carefully curated appearances from California, insiders claim William is doing something far more consequential, rewriting the rules of royal relevance in a way that could permanently neutralize Prince Harry and Meghan Markle without ever publicly touching their titles. This isn't about revenge, it's about succession. Sources close to the royal machine whisper that William has learned from every mistake the monarchy made during the Sussex fallout. Loud confrontation only feeds the narrative. Public punishment creates martyrs. So instead, the strategy is silence, restructuring, and something far colder, irrelevance by design. Key patronages quietly reassigned, access subtly narrowed, royal language updated to emphasize working royals only. No announcement needed. The message is baked into policy. What's chilling is how intentional it all feels. William isn't reacting, he's preparing. Preparing for a reign where titles without duty mean nothing, where proximity equals power, and where the monarchy survives not by clinging to bloodlines, but by controlling visibility. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud. Insiders claim this blueprint doesn't require parliament. It doesn't require stripping titles outright. It simply changes the value of those titles until they're ceremonial in name only. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan continue building a global brand around royal association. But what happens when the institution itself quietly moves on? Because if William's strategy succeeds, the question won't be, will Harry and Meghan lose their titles? It'll be, when did those titles stop mattering? And by the time the public notices, it may already be too late. The shift didn't begin with a headline. It didn't start with a leaked memo or a dramatic palace source running to the press. It began with absence. Quiet, deliberate, impossible to ignore absence. Invitations that never arrived. Appearances that were suddenly streamlined. Language and official communications that felt almost identical, but not quite. And those who understand the monarchy's machinery knew immediately. This wasn't accidental. This was design. At the center of it all was Prince William, operating in a way he never had before. Gone was the cautious heir who waited for consensus. In his place emerged someone thinking like a future monarch who had learned a brutal lesson from the Sussex era. Power in the modern monarchy isn't exercised loudly. It's exercised structurally. You don't attack. You rearrange. Insiders say William has spent years watching how every public move involving Prince Harry and Meghan Markle backfired on the institution. Each rebuttal fueled another interview. Each denial sparked another documentary. Each visible punishment created sympathy. So instead of fighting the narrative, William began preparing to outgrow it. The first signal was subtle but devastating. Royal communications began emphasizing the phrase, working members of the royal family, with new consistency. Not angrily, not defensively, just precisely. Press releases, official websites, ceremonial programs, all quietly reinforcing the same idea. Royal relevance flows from service, not bloodline alone. To the casual reader, it meant nothing. To insiders, it was a warning label. Because Harry and Meghan are no longer working royals. That distinction, once polite, was now being weaponized through repetition. And repetition in royal language is policy without paperwork. Then came the reshuffling of visibility. Key events once filled with extended family were suddenly focused. Balcony appearances narrowed. Overseas tour recalibrated. Patronages that once might have been offered symbolically were reassigned to people physically present in the UK, doing visible work, reinforcing continuity. No announcement said the Sussexes are excluded. They simply weren't included. An exclusion without explanation is the monarchy's sharpest tool. Behind closed doors, sources claim William has been ruthless about one principle. No ambiguity. Ambiguity is what allowed Harry and Meghan to monetize proximity while rejecting obligation. Ambiguity created confusion about who represented the crown. William, reportedly, wants a reign where that confusion no longer exists. What's especially telling is that this strategy doesn't require confrontation with King Charles III. Charles, by nature, seeks reconciliation. William, by training, seeks stability. Insiders say William has learned to move around his father's instincts rather than against them, building systems that don't need emotional agreement to function. You don't strip titles. You render them ceremonial. You don't ban appearances. You stop creating platforms. And here's where the real recalibration begins. Royal funding structures, access to briefings, inclusion in planning, these aren't emotional decisions. They're operational. And according to palace watchers, William has been deeply involved in future-proofing all of them. The goal isn't punishment. The goal is a monarchy that functions cleanly without external narratives attached. Harry and Meghan's power has always rested on association. The suggestion that they are insiders, that they speak with authority, that their titles imply relevance. William's strategy appears designed to sever that implication without ever touching the titles themselves. Because legally stripping titles is messy, political, and explosive, making titles irrelevant is elegant. The language shift is everything. Royal commentary now increasingly frames the monarchy as an institution defined by duty, continuity, and geographic presence. Service in Britain, representation abroad on behalf of the crown, not personal brand building. It's a subtle redefinition of what royal means in practice. And in that definition, the Sussex model simply doesn't fit. What's chilling is how patient the plan appears to be. There's no rush, no need to provoke response. Every year that passes with Harry and Meghan outside the operational core weakens the symbolic weight of their titles. New generations of the public grow accustomed to seeing a smaller, more focused royal circle. By the time William ascends the throne, that structure will feel normal. Normalization is the real power play. And insiders say William understands that better than anyone. Because when the public no longer expects Harry and Meghan to be part of royal life, removing them becomes unnecessary. The question shifts from why are they excluded to why would they be included? And that is a fundamentally different conversation. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan continue to build projects that lean heavily on royal branding. But branding only works when the source retains authority. If William succeeds in repositioning the monarchy as something Harry and Meghan are visibly not part of, that branding begins to hollow out. Not immediately, but gradually. And gradual erosion is harder to fight than sudden loss. The most brutal part? There's nothing to respond to. No accusation to deny, no punishment to challenge, no decision to litigate, just a steady narrowing of relevance that leaves no villain and no rallying cry. The Sussexes can speak. They can produce content. They can tell their story. But the institution they reference will increasingly look like something they left behind. And that may be the point. Because if this strategy continues, by the time the public starts asking whether Harry and Meghan should lose their titles, William's answer, spoken or not, will already be embedded in reality. The titles didn't need to be taken. They just stopped meaning what people thought they meant. And that realization is only just beginning to surface. By the time observers realized what was happening, the architecture was already in place. This wasn't a reactionary maneuver. It was a long game, and every piece of it pointed back to the same strategist, Prince William, quietly shaping a monarchy that no longer needed to explain itself. What made this phase so unsettling was how ordinary it looked on the surface. No dramatic demotions, no explosive leaks, no palace insiders screaming betrayal. Instead, there was a gradual tightening of the frame. The royal story being told to the public became narrower, cleaner, and more disciplined. Fewer faces, fewer voices, less noise. And in that refined picture, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle simply weren't there. Royal watchers began noticing patterns. Official photos focused almost exclusively on working royals based in the UK. Press briefings emphasized active service as the core qualification for representation. Even language around family softened into institutional phrasing. It wasn't the royal family in the emotional sense anymore. It was the crown, the firm, the institution. Those distinctions matter because institutions don't owe anyone sentiment. Insiders say this shift is deliberate. William, unlike previous heirs, came of age watching the monarchy nearly fracture under the weight of personality-driven drama. Diana, Andrew, the Sussex exit. Each crisis taught the same lesson. Individuals can become liabilities if the system revolves around them. So William's vision appears to be the opposite, a monarchy where individuals are interchangeable, but the structure is untouchable. That's a nightmare scenario for the Sussexes. Their post-royal power depends on the idea that they are still central characters in the royal story, that their voices carry institutional weight, that their experiences reflect the inner workings of the crown. But if William succeeds in reframing the monarchy as a compact, duty-driven core, then Harry and Meghan's proximity becomes historical, not current. And history doesn't sell the same way. Another quiet change raised eyebrows: access. Access to briefings, access to ceremonial moments, access to the unspoken signals that tell the world who matters now. Those doors didn't slam shut, they simply stopped opening. And in royal culture, access is oxygen. Without it, relevance suffocates slowly. Crucially, this strategy avoids open conflict with King Charles III. Charles still speaks the language of unity, of reconciliation, of family. William doesn't contradict that publicly. Instead, he builds systems that function regardless of emotion. Family can be acknowledged without being empowered. Titles can exist without being activated. It's a distinction that allows William to respect his father's tone while preparing a very different reign. Observers note how often Charles emphasizes continuity, while William emphasizes clarity. Clarity about who represents the crown, clarity about what duty looks like, clarity about the difference between royal service and personal branding. That clarity is lethal to ambiguity, and ambiguity has been the Sussexes' greatest asset. For years, Harry and Meghan have occupied a gray zone, not working royals, but not entirely outside the institution. That gray zone allowed them to leverage royal status while rejecting royal constraints. William's restructuring appears designed to eliminate that zone entirely. And the brilliance of it? It doesn't require legislation. Stripping titles would require parliament, ignite political debate, and create martyrs. But redefining relevance requires only consistency. Consistency in who appears. Consistency in who speaks. Consistency in what the monarchy rewards with visibility. Visibility is the real currency. When people stop seeing you as part of something, your symbolic value erodes. Younger audiences, especially, learn the monarchy through repetition. Who's on the balcony? Who's on the tour? Who's in the photos? If Harry and Meghan aren't there year after year, their absence becomes unremarkable. Unremarkable is fatal to celebrity. Insiders claim William is acutely aware of this generational shift. He's not governing for today's outrage cycle. He's governing for what feels normal in 10, 20, 30 years. By the time he ascends the throne, the idea that the Sussexes should be central may already feel outdated. And then comes the branding problem. Harry and Meghan's projects, books, interviews, documentaries, draw power from the monarchy's mystique. They trade on the assumption that the royal world they describe still exists in the form they experienced. But if William successfully modernizes and streamlines the institution, that world begins to look obsolete. A relic of a transitional era. The institution moves on. The storytellers remain behind. That's when narratives start to age poorly. Another subtle but telling sign, the emphasis on teamwork. William increasingly presents the monarchy as a collective effort. A unit, a system where no single personality dominates. This contrasts sharply with the Sussex narrative, which centers individual grievance and personal truth. One model absorbs conflict, the other amplifies it, and institutions always win that comparison. Because while individuals burn bright, institutions endure by outlasting drama. Palace sources say William is deeply aware that the Sussexes' greatest weapon is attention. Every public clash feeds it. So the counter-strategy is starvation. Less mention, less reaction, less engagement. The monarchy doesn't rebut, it proceeds. The result is asymmetry. Harry and Meghan speak loudly. The monarchy speaks softly or not at all. And over time, the louder voice begins to sound increasingly disconnected from the source it references. This is where the power imbalance becomes irreversible. Because if William's version of the monarchy becomes the accepted norm, then any future attempt by Harry and Meghan to reinsert themselves looks disruptive rather than corrective. They stop looking like exiled insiders and start looking like external commentators. That shift is subtle but devastating, and it explains why this phase of the strategy feels colder than the last. There's no emotional language left, no family drama to resolve, just an institution moving forward with ruthless calm. The most unsettling realization for royal watchers is this: William isn't trying to punish Harry and Meghan. He's preparing a monarchy that doesn't need them at all. And once an institution learns how to function without you, reclaiming relevance becomes nearly impossible. By the end of this phase, one thing is becoming clear to those paying attention. The question is no longer whether William will strip titles. It's whether titles still have power when the institution that gives them meaning has already moved on. By the final phase, the strategy stops looking like theory and starts looking like inevitability. What once felt like subtle signals now reads as a completed framework, one that Prince William can step into at any moment without disruption. This is the part most casual observers miss, because nothing dramatic happens. No announcement, no rupture, just a future quietly locking into place. The key shift is psychological. The monarchy is no longer positioning itself as a family saga. It is repositioning itself as a service brand, predictable, restrained, and deliberately boring. And in that kind of structure, personalities don't drive relevance. Function does. William appears to understand that the monarchy's survival depends on becoming uninteresting in the best possible way. dependable, contained, and immune to personality-driven chaos. That evolution is devastating for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, because their leverage has always depended on the monarchy remaining emotionally legible. As long as the crown feels like a family story, with villains, victims, betrayals, and wounds, their voices carry weight. But when the crown reframes itself as an institution that simply operates, those narratives lose oxygen. This is where the long-term damage sets in. William's model doesn't argue with Harry and Meghan's claims. It doesn't validate or invalidate them. It simply renders them irrelevant to the institution's present tense. And relevance, not legality, is what determines power in a modern monarchy. Titles are symbolic. Relevance is operational. Because once the institution stops engaging emotionally, it stops being reactive. And when an institution stops reacting, it becomes unassailable. There is nothing to rebut, nothing to correct, nothing to apologize for. The monarchy simply exists, unchanged by external commentary. The generational factor makes this strategy airtight. Younger audiences are not invested in royal backstory the way older generations are. They learn the monarchy through visuals, repetition, and cues. Who shows up? Who speaks? Who is framed as relevant? If Harry and Meghan are absent from those cues year after year, their royal association fades into trivia rather than identity. William appears to be betting on time. Time normalizes absence. Time dulls outrage. Time rewrites expectations. By the time he ascends the throne, the idea that Harry and Meghan should play any role may feel strange rather than controversial. What's more, this strategy protects King Charles III from being the villain. Charles can continue to speak in the language of reconciliation and affection. He doesn't have to strip titles or issue condemnations. William's framework works regardless of Charles's tone. It allows the monarchy to appear compassionate at the surface while operating with precision underneath. That duality is intentional. Charles represents continuity with the past. William represents control over the future. And futures are built on systems, not sentiment. The Sussex dilemma becomes increasingly stark in this context. They can continue to speak, but speaking without institutional relevance turns into commentary, not authority. They can continue to produce content, but content detached from power becomes entertainment, not intervention. And the more the monarchy refuses to respond, the more asymmetrical the relationship becomes. One side speaks, the other side proceeds. And proceedings always outlast speeches. Royal watchers note that this phase also insulates William from future crises. By shrinking the circle of active royals and tying relevance strictly to duty, he reduces the risk of scandal contagion. Fewer people represent the crown. Fewer voices can contradict one another. Fewer narratives can spiral out of control. It's a containment strategy learned from decades of institutional bruising. And it works precisely because it is boring. There is no villain arc, no redemption arc, no public reckoning, just a quiet narrowing of the frame until only those who operate within it remain visible. The most unsettling realization for critics and supporters alike is that this strategy leaves Harry and Meghan with no clear countermove. If they escalate, they look disruptive. If they stay silent, they fade further. If they seek reconciliation, they re-enter on terms that offer no leverage. Every path leads to the same outcome: diminished institutional relevance. And that is the point. William is not trying to erase Harry and Meghan from history. He is ensuring they do not shape the monarchy's future. History can be debated. The future, once structured, simply unfolds. By the end of this phase, the question of stripping titles becomes almost irrelevant, because titles only matter if the institution activates them. And in William's monarchy, activation appears to be reserved for those who serve, show up, and submit to the system. Everything else becomes ceremonial noise. The public may not notice the exact moment this shift completes. There will be no announcement, no breaking news banner, just a growing sense that the royal story has moved on and that some characters are no longer part of the plot. And when that realization finally settles in, it won't feel like punishment. It will feel like something far more final. It will feel like the rules changed quietly, and no one bothered to tell the people who thought they still mattered. If you've made it this far, don't pretend this was just royal gossip. What you just watched was a power shift in slow motion, the kind that doesn't announce itself until it's already irreversible. This isn't about titles on paper. It's about who controls relevance, visibility, and the future narrative of the monarchy itself. Hit like right now if you felt how calculated this move really is. Not because you support one side or the other, but because stories like this only stay alive when people recognize what's happening before the headlines catch up. Drop a comment and tell me what you think is more ruthless: stripping titles publicly or quietly making them meaningless. The comment section is where the real debate is happening and where this story keeps evolving. People will say this is overblown. They'll say nothing's changed. They'll say titles are forever. But power doesn't move loudly anymore. It moves patiently. And once an institution learns how to function without you, there's no announcement when the door finally closes. Stay locked in, stay watching closely. Because by the time the world realizes the rules have changed, the people who lost will already be written out of the story.